see here, get things arranged a little bit. Yeah, it's been, yeah, things have happened since last I used this computer. Things got moved around. I didn't think earlier to get everything set up. Well, good evening. Welcome to our Friday night Bible study. This will be for Friday, August the 8th. Double check that. Yes, the 8th of August, 8/8/25. That's the date. And we happened upon something a couple of hours ago. And so I'm going to mention it because, sometimes we talk about what's in the news. We discovered live coverage of an incident in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And let me get a different screen up here, not only on my computer, but then also here. And I'm going to take my picture off entirely. You're looking here, and I'm going to zoom out for a little bit. You're looking here at a portion of the Emory University campus. That's just northeast of Atlanta. And as I zoom out, you can see there's Atlanta proper. If you look a little ways south of there, there's the Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson Airport down there at the bottom of the screen. So this is the area up here, northeast of Atlanta. And this is a kind of a double campus. And there's a reason for that. I'll get into that in a moment. The incident was a shooting, and the shooting was taking place right at this location. You see that little round raised roof there on the corner of that building. The first floor there and the entrances around that kind of rounded structure is a CVS pharmacy. And there was an active shooter at the pharmacy. And, of course, the news didn't know what was going on. They just knew that all of a sudden there were police all up and down these roads. Now, what's across the street here, these buildings here, this whole section that we're looking at now, is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. You may have heard that federal agency is headquartered in the Atlanta area, and these are their headquarters. Now, these low green roof buildings, kind of in the middle of the screen now, are, as far as I can tell, a child care center associated either with the CDC or with the university. I'm not sure. I thought at first it would be with the CDC because the signing looked similar to the signage for the CDC, but then I got to looking around and the university signage is also very similar. The land on which the CDC buildings were erected was purchased from Emory University back in 1947. So also the CDC cooperates with Emory University, uses the professors there and the medical center there as places to do research that the CDC relies on. So Emory University, by the way, is a private university. And so the information that we had was that sometime after this started, a body was removed from that CVS pharmacy under a sheet, indicating that the body was deceased. And there was speculation anyway that the body in question was the body of the shooter, shot either by himself or by officers. And at the point that we quit monitoring it, they couldn't be sure. Obviously, this is something that had the full attention of the Atlanta area media such as WSB-TV. I think that's they were the ones with the footage that we were seeing, and they had a helicopter up so that you could see down, and you could see this is this road that you see kind of highlighted in yellow on Google Earth there. Well, you can't see it now. Let's go to this display. That big yellow line there, that's Clifton Road. The intersecting road there is called the CDC Parkway. Well, you can guess why it would be considered CDC Parkway. Yeah, remind me later about that. So that's kind of big news. As we were watching, they got still pictures that they put on, taken from the offices of the Centers for Disease Control, showing bullet holes in the glass of that building, suggesting that the person who was doing the shooting was aiming at the CDC and was just using the CVS pharmacy there as a convenient place from which to take these shots. And the broken glass that you could see indicated that the individual had a high-powered weapon in order to reach that far. Well, you can see the vehicles there, and you can see how far it is from here over to these high-rise buildings for the CDC. So if someone was able to shoot from that far away and put holes in the probably heavy glass on those buildings, that they were using a quite high-powered weapon to be able to pull that off. So that's just something that was going on, another indication that we're in a very broken, messed up world, and that we humans ultimately don't have a clue how to fix it. There's a lot of people out there with a lot of ideas. There's a lot of ideology about how to go about fixing it, and people get into disagreements about the ideology, which is kind of ridiculous, because neither side knows how to fix the problems. Neither side ultimately has the power to fix the problems, because it is not something that humans can fix. We're part of this planet. This planet is broken, and all its systems being run by broken humans are broken systems. And we just, and I know that sounds very pessimistic, and there's a term for that. And I don't mean to be that way, because I believe that this world was created, and that it was created intentionally and with intelligence. So there is an intelligent creator, and that the intelligent creator has made an appearance and stated an intention to fix the mess. Now, well, if he's going to do it, why hasn't he done it yet? Well, you're not the creator. How do you know what's in his mind? You don't. And you can't give reasons for what he does or doesn't do, because, and this is not to say that what God does is incomprehensible. It's just to say that we human beings don't know, and it would be foolish for us to second guess him. To ask questions, absolutely. You want to question what God's doing and complain to him? Well, guess what? He's big, and he's got broad shoulders, and he can take it. And he won't hold it against you when you complain. So if you're having a hard time living in this world and you wish he'd do something about it, unload it on him, because he's not going to hold it against you that you're complaining to him. Particularly if you're complaining to him and maybe while you're at it, being willing to listen to what he might have to say to you about what you can do about the situation, limited as it would be. Certainly you're not going to give a universal permanent solution, but maybe there are things you can do to make this world a better place. And anyway, so we can, yeah, I know you're not seeing my screen, we can minimize that and we can go on about our evening. Now I had in mind to play something, and I didn't play it. I played out of that hymnal that I'm going through right now, and you heard some songs. There was one song there by Jimmy Owens, Jimmy and Carol Owens. Jimmy passed away just a few years ago. Um, he used to have a website. When I looked it up to directly from the web, it's no longer there. The domain registration is expired, so nobody's keeping that up. There was some obvious music by Bill Gaither, and there was some newer music. You may have recognized some of it as newer. Brian Jeffrey Leach was represented in those. At any rate, yeah, I think we're ready. We're reading through the Old Testament, and here's what I wanted to say, and why I started this up. There was something I was thinking of playing. I have not gone thoroughly enough through all the music that I got from my mother after she passed away. I put it in boxes and put it up in the attic. I had gone up there a couple of times to look through it and bring things down. So I have some of that music down here that, looks like something I'd be interested in messing with. But years ago, she had out her books of the Beethoven piano sonatas. And I had practiced up one of those to the point that I had it memorized. Now, I'm not a very good pianist technically, so even if I have it memorized, doesn't mean I'm going to play it very well. But I had it memorized, and since then, I have not seen the music for that particular single movement of one sonata that I memorized, and I've kept it in memory by occasionally sitting down and playing through it again from memory. Well, there's some muscle memory involved, but that kind of wears away over time. And so then I have an oral memory of what, at least in my mind, it's supposed to sound like. And when I get stuck, then I can play through it a few times and play with the notes and say, oh, well, maybe this is what it needs to be. And then maybe later I come back and I play through it, and then the muscle memory comes back. Oh, well, these are the notes I'm supposed to play. But I could not guarantee that the way I play it now is note for note the way it's written. And I can't check it because I haven't gone upstairs, and right now it's not the time of the year to go up in the attic to try to find anything, because it would be way too hot up there. I haven't gotten down, I haven't found the music and brought it down to refresh that part of my memory. So, and the reason I bring that up is to point out that human memory is faulty, and it is also malleable. It is possible, it's been demonstrated experimentally, that it is possible to implant memories that turn out to be false. That you remember something that didn't happen. And more particularly, it is very easy to get mixed up and to recall things in a particular way that doesn't reflect how they actually happen. And given the human penchant for self-orientation and self-justification, people are very likely to remember a particular event in a light that favors them and absolves them of responsibility for the bad situation that they're in. So then, they're busy casting blame at other people over something that, at least to some extent, is also their own fault. But they're unable to see their own fault in the matter because, well, that's just the nature of the human. We're busy justifying self. We want to look good, at least to ourselves. And we want others to think of us as good when they look at us. And so we're going to try to project a positive image of the people around us. And so given the malleability of human memory, we may remember an event, and there may be certain key elements of it that we remember accurately, but there may be other things that over time get warped to suit the view we want to take of a particular situation or matter. And you get into court, and judges know this. People will get in court and they'll testify, and there is no way to believe both stories. And yet both witnesses are convinced that they're telling the truth, and if confronted about the other one, they will come out, well, they're lying. Well, they may not be lying any more than the witness in question is lying. They might both be lying to some extent. And both of them are recalling the events in a light favorable to themselves, because that's human nature. And so then the judge has to say, well, okay, what's this person's bias in this matter? A case that I watched just last night. It was a Child Protective Services case. And the mother was in court, but there was another woman in court. They gave the name of the baby, who's only a couple of months old or so. So it's still really an infant. And then the name of the woman who was not the mother, the last name of her, matched the last name given for the child. But she's not the mother. The other woman is the mother. And when this woman, she became the first one to testify, and the state's attorney who was bringing the case before the court questioned her first and asked her what her relationship was here. Well, her child is my husband's son. And the testimony went on. And then another attorney began to cross-examine this witness. I think maybe it was the mother's attorney, and I'm about to explain why I think that. Because one of the first things she asked her, so you're the new wife and you're coming with your husband over to visit his son. And her answer was, I'm not the new wife, I've always been his wife. Okay, and yet she is quite clear that this infant is her husband's child. That means she knows that this woman has been with her husband, even as she was still married to her husband, and apparently still is, and goes with him when he goes to this woman's house to visit his child at 2 to 5 o'clock in the morning when the mother is drunk. I mean, this was, and this woman actually took some video of the woman, and the video was submitted to the court as evidence. Yeah. But, the judge has to, and I think this was the intent, and that's why I think it was the mother's attorney who asked that question, knowing what the truth was, that this man had been unfaithful to his wife, so his wife had reason to want to make that woman out in a bad light. It's interesting, they went through the hearing, they got all the testimony, and the judge took a short recess so she could review the video. It got admitted into evidence, but it wasn't actually shown during the hearing, so we didn't get to see it. But the judge went into chambers and watched the videos. There was 4 of them. They were very short, only a few seconds each. But there was testimony that very highly concerned the judge, and she made that the big issue when she came back and issued her rulings. And one of her rulings was to require the mother to take a water safety course. Why, you might ask? Well, she lives in an apartment, and there is a pool associated with her apartment. And the testimony was that she had allowed her son, this is not the infant son, this is another son from apparently a different baby daddy, to go out to the pool while she stayed in the apartment. And the judge just kind of went ballistic on the woman over that. Asked her, do you know how long it takes a child to die? And she said she did. Well, then she got more specific. Okay, tell me, how long does it take a child to die? Well, then she couldn't come up with an exact time. And the judge says, well, I know these things. It only takes a few seconds for a child to drown. Now, what's a child going to do when it drowns? Well, again, mother didn't seem to know. Well, if you think that the child is going to thrash about and holler and everything, you're going to be wrong. The child, by nature, by reflex, is going to be pushing its arms down, trying to keep the head above water. So it's not going to be putting its arms up and thrashing about and making splashing noises. And there have been instances where children have drowned in a pool with a whole group of people present, and nobody noticed. Once the child goes under, there may be no notice in other activity and sounds. Nobody hears the child in distress, and the child drowns right there in the presence of everybody. And there have been other instances where parents have looked away for just a few moments, maybe we need to answer the phone or even something less than that. And they turn back around and the kid's gone. And the kid ends up deceased from drowning. So the judge really got on the woman's case about that. And as I said, she required her to take a water safety course, and she told her, you're not going to let your child, I don't care who's out there and how much you trust them, you personally need to be out there if your child's going to be in that pool. And she kept writing, well, he knows how to swim. Well, that doesn't matter. People who know how to swim drown all the time. Yeah, so. Well, that's enough of that nattering on. We want to go ahead and get started in 2 Chronicles. We got up to chapter 10 last week, so we're going to pick up there and move forward. And let's bow our heads and begin. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your blessings, and we thank you for your Son, Jesus, who came to this earth to tell us that the Creator who formed this world has an interest in it still, and has a plan to fix all that is broken on this planet. We would like to be part of that fix. We would like to be fixed and repaired ourselves, and we would like the Holy Spirit to come to make an influence on us, to help us understand who you are, so that we can have that character and that image restored in us the way we were created to be to begin with. And we ask that that Spirit might be part of our study as we look at the written word this evening. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. So I see I forgot to change the scene transition. So the scene transition that I intended for this, I'm sure it looks goofy because it doesn't do what I really wanted it to do, but was the one that I was using. So I've just switched the scene transition there to what is standard. But anyway, so 2 Chronicles chapter 10, again the New Living Translation, which we've been reading. We started with the New Testament, 2 or 3 years ago, and we've been working our way. We worked our way through the New Testament. Now we're working our way through the Old Testament. And when we get to the New Testament, we'll just keep going. We might change translations at that point. And I do not use, I've said this many times, but I'm going to say it again. We don't use the New Living Translation because we think it's better than any other translation out there. In fact, admittedly, it is highly interpretive, and in that case may actually get away from the intent of the authors, best we can tell. But because it's different from what most of us are used to, then it's an opportunity to see it in a slightly different light and to engage our brains. Okay, what is being said here? What does it mean? And that's what we'd really like to do, is to focus on the meaning. And then, beyond what the authors intended, understand what God himself would like us to conceive from it. And going back to what we just discussed, that human tendency towards self-justification and the limitations of our memory, understanding that occasionally there may be places where the account isn't as accurate as we would like, but that it is reliable. There's a difference between accurate and reliable, and we would hold that the biblical account is reliable, but not necessarily always accurate. At any rate. And right now, we're going through Chronicles rather quickly because the history, we've just read all that as we went through the books of Samuel and Kings. And we're now in the section will be covered by 1st and 2nd Kings here in 2nd Chronicles. In fact, 1st Chronicles ends about where the books of Samuel end, and 2nd Chronicles begins roughly where the book of 1st Kings begins. Another thing that we have talked about, and I haven't really drilled down on this, and I'd like to right now, we have said several times, and we will say it more as we go through this, that this account has a tendency to kind of whitewash the Judean kings. Of course, up until this point, it's been the kings of all Israel, but that's about to change. As you can see here, the title is The Northern Tribes Revolt. So the tribes will separate, never again to be fully reunited. And we're going to talk about that too in just a moment here. So these books, unlike the books of Samuel and Kings, were prepared after the Jews returned from the Babylonian captivity. Now, the northern tribes had already gone into captivity to Babylon's predecessor, Assyria, which was headquartered in Nineveh. And as we read, the Assyrians moved the people of the northern 10 tribes out to other places and moved other people into the land. And then there were problems. The people weren't adjusted to it. They didn't know how to deal with the Pharaoh predators in the land, and some of the people were dying. And it was suggested that, well, you don't know what the God of the land requires, so you're not living right, and that's why the God of the land has sent these Pharaoh predators to kill you. So then they sent for some priests from the northern tribes to come in and teach the people how to worship the God of the land, so to speak. And so then the people began to do these things. But they didn't give up their own religious traditions. They followed them too. Now, I have read places that suggest that the people in this territory, when the Jews returned to Jerusalem, are these people, the people moved there by the Assyrians who were not Israelites at all and only partially worship Jehovah, and gave that as a reason for the Jews to refuse to let them take part in rebuilding the Jerusalem temple. But I think you'll find is, particularly when we get into Ezra and Nehemiah, as we read through these things, we're going to find that the people that were refused were not these people moved there by the Assyrians, but were, in fact, descendants of the 10 tribes who moved back into the territory, much as the Jews moved back into their territory after the Babylonian captivity. And it was those people that Ezra and Nehemiah denied an opportunity to assist in building and rebuilding the temple at Jerusalem. And if, in fact, as we believe that was the case, then they had an interest as they recounted the history of Judea, because we're not going to read much. We're going to read some mention of the kings of the northern tribes as they interacted with the kings of Judea, but for the most part, this is going to be the history of the kings of Judea. And we've already noted that Bathsheba is not mentioned in Chronicles, and there are other events that are completely left out of the account, as if the authors of these accounts are trying to whitewash the records of the kings of Judea. Now, not entirely. They'll say bad things, particularly about Rehoboam. We're gonna see that here very shortly. But they're going to, in other cases, mention things about these Judean kings that were not mentioned about those kings in the books of Samuel and Kings. The record that I believe was kept by the prophets more or less on a contemporary basis. And part of the reason for believing that is because, for example, the story of Hezekiah and Sennacherib, when Sennacherib threatened Jerusalem, and then of Hezekiah's illness, of his recovery, and of the envoys from Babylon. All those accounts, as you read them in the book of 2 Kings, are virtually word for word the accounts that you read in the book of Isaiah. Yeah. So that makes us think that essentially Isaiah's work got put in there along with the work of the other prophets who helped to construct this history of the tribes of Israel from the time of Samuel, Eli and Samuel forward. So here we go, chapter 10, verse 1. Rehoboam went to Shechem. Now, we had a sermon presentation a while back where we read about Shechem, and during that time, after that presentation, I took a little time for those who were interested to look at Google Earth and to look at the locations of the various cities, including Shechem. And you may remember that Shechem was the city where Jacob's daughter Dinah was violated, and in retaliation, Jacob's sons deceived the people and then killed them all. Then later, Shechem was the city that picked the son of Gideon's concubine to be their leader, and this led to further bloodshed and destruction, as we covered in that. So that's the Shechem, and at this point, we know that's in the northern portion, north of Jerusalem, in the northern 10 tribes. And that's where Rehoboam went. He went to Shechem, where all Israel had gathered to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard of this, he returned from Egypt, for he had fled to Egypt to escape from King Solomon. He had been an official in the court of King Solomon, and Solomon had detected a subversive element in him and had threatened him, and he'd fled to Egypt in fear for his life, and probably very justly, because when you have a situation with kings like that, who are monarchs that have nobody that they answer to other than the people themselves, and that only indirectly, if you make the king mad enough, he can order your execution, and he will have people that will carry it out. So you have to be careful, and if you're going to make trouble, you have to be prepared to leave, and that's what Jeroboam did. He fled to Egypt and got in good with the king of Egypt, with Pharaoh. So now it says, the leaders of Israel summoned him, and Jeroboam and all Israel went to speak with Rehoboam. Your father was a hard master, they said. Well, yeah, he had to be. He had all this labor that he conscripted, and he had all these taxes to make him such a wealthy man. So they're saying, listen, okay, Solomon, we liked him. He was David's son. He did some good things. But man, it's been a load on us to pay all these taxes and do all this labor. Tell you what, if you lighten it, if you reduce our taxes and reduce the demands for free labor from us, that your father imposed on us. We will be your loyal subjects. Give us a break, we'll stay with you. Rehoboam replied, come back in 3 days for my answer. So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam discussed the matter with the older men who had counseled his father Solomon. What is your advice? He asked. How should I answer these people? The older counselors replied, if you are good to these people and do your best to please them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your loyal subjects. And we're going to see here how in this kind of a situation a king is, at least to some extent, held accountable to the people themselves. So the older counselors are saying, listen, the people have had it up to here with all the taxes and forced labor that your father imposed on them. You don't really need this. You've inherited all this wealth from your father. The kingdom is secure. You don't have significant enemies. You don't need all these taxes. Treat the people better than your father did, and they'll be loyal to you. They'll stick with you. They'll like you, even more perhaps than they liked your father. But Rehoboam rejected the advice of the older men and instead asked the opinion of the young men who had grown up with him and who are now his advisors. What is your advice? He asked them. How should I answer these people who want me to lighten the burdens imposed by my father? And now we see the brashness and arrogance of youth. The young men replied, this is what you should tell those complainers who want a lighter burden. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Yes, my father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions. And there's no reference there. I have an idea that scorpions, there were whips, and then there were whips that had thorns and rocks and things tied to the tips. And that's what was meant there by scorpions, because then instead of just raising a welt or possibly opening the skin, these things were guaranteed to open the skin, because these little projectiles would strike the skin and break it, slice through it as the whip was applied. 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to hear Rehoboam's decision, just as the king had ordered. But Rehoboam spoke harshly to them, for he rejected the advice of the older counselors and followed the counsel of his younger advisors. He told the people, my father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions. So the king paid no attention to the people. This turn of events was the will of God, for it fulfilled the Lord's message to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through the prophet Ahijah from Shiloh. Now this is a common misconception, and we can understand why the Old Testament writers, particularly this far away from the event, would look at this and conclude that what happened was God's will. And we have people in our day who will tell you that whatever happens is God's will. It happened this way because God willed it. God wanted it to be. As if somehow we are all automatons tied to what God wants. Now that's ridiculous in the extreme once you think about it, because we're all sinners. And if you're going to take that thing, then it's God's will that we be sinners. And then it's God's will that sinners should be sent to hell to be tormented in the flames forever and ever. That's also God's will. What kind of a God do they portray? What kind of a sadistic beast would it take to be his will that people have no choice but to do these sins? That's his will, and that he's going to punish them forever for it because they offended him with their actions. You just have to be an absolute, unthinking, uncaring, self-important tyrant to think like that. And yet people will tell you these things are God's will. Well, no. If everything that happened was God's will, there would not be sin in this planet or this universe at all. Because that's not God's will. God didn't want these things. They happened anyway. Because God grants freedom. And that's the other thing that people find very difficult. Because we live in a world where freedom is more or less just a concept. We don't really grant freedom because human beings cannot be trusted with liberty. You give somebody liberty, they're going to use it to destroy the people around them. Well, we can't have that. So we have to put limitations on people's freedom and liberty. So when we look at God from our human perspective, we see him all too often in the light of our human systems where it wouldn't be appropriate to grant perfect liberty. So we see God granting perfect liberty and not intervening when people do terrible things, and we come up with all sorts of wild and weird theories to explain it. So now we see the kingdom being torn asunder here, and these writers say, well, this was the will of God. No, it wasn't. It was the will of Rehoboam himself. He's the one that wanted to take this approach to the people. He's the one that cost himself the kingdom. It was his choice, his decision. He had the freedom to decide this. He decided it. God didn't make him do it. And it was clearly not God's will, because we'll read later in the prophets that God intended to bring these nations back into unity. It didn't happen, but it was what God wanted. And I think that's an important thing for us to grasp. Just because God wants it doesn't mean he gets it. And we look at that from a human perspective because if one of us as humans had the kind of absolute power that we believe the Creator has, we wouldn't let things that we don't want keep going like that. We would put an end to them. And so we don't understand it when God grants people individual liberty and lets them do these things. And, well, if it happened, it has to be God's will. He wanted it for whatever reason. He's got some purpose in it. Well, God is good at taking what people do and bringing good out of it. This is true. But that doesn't mean it's his will. That just means he can take what happens and use it for good because that's what he's good at. He's the creator. He's all-knowing. He's all-wise. He can do these things that we can't do. But let's not get confused and think that, well, it happened, therefore it was God's will. No. Now, it did fulfill the Lord's message to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through the prophet Ahijah from Shiloh. Now, this bit about the prophecies also confuses people, because there are people who suggest that the prophets accurately predict what's going to happen because God has spoken to them. It's what God intends, therefore God is going to make it happen the way he said it would. In fact, we will, when we get into the prophets, we will read that stated quite explicitly, that the prophecies, the predictions about the future are accurate because God does what he says he's going to do. And when it comes to his promises, well, his promises are conditional. But if we are willing, if we are submissive, if we trust him and say, Creator, you know how you made me, you know what I should be, I'm going to let you fix my problems, then the promises that God has made can be fulfilled in our lives. And we can count on it. We can trust that because God has said it and he will do it. But just because God predicts disaster does not mean then that God causes that disaster to take place. that would place responsibility for it on God. And we can never replace the responsibility for evil on the Creator. The responsibility for evil and destruction should land where it belongs, on the destroyer. Reading on then, verse 16. When all Israel realized that the king had refused to listen to them, they responded, "Down with the dynasty of David. We have no interest in the son of Jesse. Back to your homes, O Israel. Look out for your own house, O David." So all the people of Israel returned home, but Rehoboam continued to rule over the Israelites who lived in the towns of Judah. King Rehoboam sent Adoniram, who was in charge of forced labor, to restore order. Now this is a different Adoniram, because the Adoniram who was David's son died at the hands of Solomon when he requested the young lady that had kept David warm in his closing days as his wife. And Solomon said, "No, you can ask for that. You might as well ask for the throne." And he sent his enforcer out to put an end to Adoniram's life. So this is a different Adoniram. And we've just crossed those two footnotes, B and C. Let's go down and see what they say. As in the Syriac version and the Latin Vulgate and many Hebrew manuscripts, the Masoretic text lacks realized. Okay, probably not very important. And then the Hebrew is Hadoram, a variant spelling of Adoniram, and compare 1 Kings 4:6, 5:14, and 12:18. But the people of Israel stoned him to death. When this news reached King Rehoboam, he quickly jumped into his chariot and fled to Jerusalem, and to this day the northern tribes of Israel have refused to be ruled by a descendant of David. Now this is interesting, because they're saying to this day, and we believe that these accounts were written after the Babylonian captivity. So now they're saying that these people of the northern tribes are still refusing to be ruled by a descendant of David. Well, I don't know. Their offer to assist in rebuilding the temple may have indicated an interest in reuniting the northern and southern kingdoms. And there were still descendants of David who ruled over Judea at that time. So, but that's how they looked at it, and that's their perspective, and that's what they wrote down, because that was their perspective. That was their perception of truth. When Rehoboam arrived at Jerusalem, he mobilized the men of Judah and Benjamin, 180,000 select troops, to fight against Israel and restore the kingdom to himself. They're going to rebel against me. Well, I'll put an end to that. I'll take them back by force. But the Lord said to Shemaiah, the man of God, "Say to Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to all the Israelites in Judah and Benjamin, this is what the Lord says. Do not fight against your relatives. Go back home, for what has happened is my doing." So they obeyed the message of the Lord and did not fight against Jeroboam. And we read that with a little bit more detail back in the books of Kings. Rehoboam remained in Jerusalem and fortified various towns for the defense of Judah. He built up Bethlehem, Etam, Tekoa, Bethzur, Soko, Adullam, Gath, Marashah, Ziph, Adoraim, Lachish, Azekah, Zorah, Aijalon, and Hebron. And some of these names we know before. Lachish we know from the story of Hezekiah. So these are all now fortified towns of Judah and Benjamin, at the hands, to some extent, of Rehoboam, who says Rehoboam strengthened their defenses and stationed commanders in them, and he stored supplies of food, olive oil, and wine. He also put shields and spears in these towns as a further safety measure. So in other words, there would be weapons and armor for the men charged with protecting these cities from any threats from any direction, say from Egypt or from the Israelites or wherever. So only Judah and Benjamin remained under his control. But all the priests and Levites living among the northern tribes of Israel sided with Rehoboam. The Levites even abandoned their pasture lands and property and moved to Judah and Jerusalem because Jeroboam and his sons would not allow them to serve Yahweh as priests. Recall that Jeroboam set up his own system of worship. He put up the gold calves. Jeroboam appointed his own priests to serve at the pagan shrines where they worshiped the goat and calf idols he had made. From all the tribes of Israel, those who sincerely wanted to worship Yahweh, the God of Israel, followed the Levites to Jerusalem where they could offer sacrifices to the Lord, the God of their ancestors. Well, we didn't read this particular verbiage in the books of Kings. And this, again, I think, is a further attempt to justify the shutout of the people of the northern tribes that Ezra and Nehemiah engaged in when rebuilding the temple. Well, we're going to justify it. Well, those people, they didn't want to worship God. The ones among them who wanted to worship God moved down here and became part of our tribes. This strengthened the kingdom of Judah, and for 3 years they supported Rehoboam, son of Solomon, for during those years they faithfully followed in the footsteps of David and Solomon. Rehoboam married his cousin Mahalath, the daughter of David's son Jeremoth, and of Abihail, the daughter of Eliab, son of Jesse. Mahalath had 3 sons, Jerush, Shemariah, and Zaham. Later, Rehoboam married another cousin, Maacah, the granddaughter of Absalom. Maacah gave birth to Abijah, Attai, Ziza, and Shelomith. Rehoboam loved Maacah more than any of his other wives and concubines. All in all, he had 18 wives and 60 concubines, and they gave birth to 28 sons and 60 daughters. Now that's interesting, that the daughters now are getting mentioned in the accounts we got before. Daughters were rarely mentioned. We're sure there were some, but they were rarely mentioned. Now at least they get mentioned, even if they're not considered all that important. Rehoboam appointed Maacah's son Abijah as leader among the princes, making it clear that he would be the next king. Rehoboam also wisely gave responsibilities to his other sons and stationed some of them in the fortified towns throughout the land of Judah and Benjamin. He provided them with generous provisions, and he found many wives for them. So essentially he's kind of doing what Abraham did with his sons after Isaac and Ishmael. Those sons he provided with plenty and sent them away so that they would not become rivals to Isaac. Rehoboam's kind of doing something of the sort. Moving on to the next chapter, chapter 12. But when Rehoboam was firmly established and strong, he abandoned the law of the Lord, and all Israel followed him in this sin. Because they were unfaithful to the Lord, King Shishak of Egypt came up and attacked Jerusalem in the 5th year of King Rehoboam's reign. He came with 12,000 chariots, 60,000 horses, and a countless army of foot soldiers, including Libyans, Suckites, and Ethiopians. That would say, the footnote B would be, what was the term? Cushites. Yes. Shishak conquered Judah's fortified towns and then advanced to attack Jerusalem. Now, we've ran through the 2 footnotes there, the horses and the Ethiopians. I already told you what I thought the Ethiopians was. Yes. Charioteers or horsemen, and then the Hebrew says, and Cushites. Well, yeah. Cush was the Upper Nile region that includes, trying to think of the names. Ethiopia is a little farther south. There's the country Sudan, I think it is, just south of that. And then Ethiopia, and then Somalia. Anyway, I'm trying to remember my geography lessons, which are very old because I am too. Verse 5, the prophet Shemaiah then met with Rehoboam and Judah's leader. Now this was, I believe, the same one who delivered, and I'm trying to go back here, it didn't go yet, let's try that again. Delivered the message to prevent them. Well, that'd be way back in chapter 10, wouldn't it? Where did I see that? Okay, well, it must have been at the beginning of chapter 11 that I saw that. Yeah, Shemaiah. So this is the same prophet. He told them not to go fight against Judah. I mean against the people of the northern tribes. So now he comes to him. He met with Rehoboam and Judah's leaders, who had all fled to Jerusalem because of Shishak. Shemaiah told them, this is what the Lord says, you have abandoned me, so I am abandoning you to Shishak. Then the leaders of Israel and the king humbled themselves and said, the Lord is right in doing this to us. When the Lord saw their change of heart, he gave this message to Shemaiah. Since the people have humbled themselves, I will not completely destroy them and will soon give them some relief. I will not use Shishak to pour out my anger on Jerusalem. But they will become his subjects, so they will know the difference between serving me and serving earthly rulers. So King Shishak of Egypt came up and attacked Jerusalem. He ransacked the treasuries of the Lord's temple and the royal palace. He stole everything, including all the gold shields Solomon had made. King Rehoboam later replaced them with bronze shields as substitutes, and he entrusted them to the care of the commanders of the guard who protected the entrance to the royal palace. Whenever the king went to the temple of the Lord, the guards would also take the shields and then return them to the guard room. Because Rehoboam humbled himself, the Lord's anger was turned away, and he did not destroy him completely. There were still some good things in the land of Judah, at least according to these authors. King Rehoboam firmly established himself in Jerusalem and continued to rule. He was 41 years old when he became king, which means he was about 1 year old when his father became king. And he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the seat of the Lord had chosen from among all the tribes of Israel as the place to honor his name. Rehoboam's mother was Naamah, a woman from Ammon, but he was an evil king, for he did not seek the Lord with all his heart. The rest of the events of Rehoboam's reign, from beginning to end, are recorded in the record of Shemaiah the prophet and the record of Iddo the seer, which are part of the genealogical record. Rehoboam and Jeroboam were continually at war with each other. When Rehoboam died, he was buried in the city of David. Then his son Abijah became the next king. And we already read about Abijah, how he was the son of another of Rehoboam's cousins that he married, and he was the son of Absalom's granddaughter. Abijah began to rule over Judea in the 18th year of Jeroboam's reign in Israel. Now, you notice it said that Rehoboam reigned for 17 years. And this is where one of the places where I think Dr. Thiele got his theory about accession year versus another way of counting the years of the king. So it's been 17 years, but if you count the first year as year one, then this is the 18th year of Jeroboam's reign. He reigned in Jerusalem 3 years. His mother was Maacah, the daughter of Uriel from Gibeon. Then war broke out between Abijah and Jeroboam. Well, that's not surprising. There'd already been a war. Judah, led by King Abijah, fielded 400,000 select warriors, while Jeroboam mustered 800,000 select troops from Israel. When the army of Judah arrived in the hill country of Ephraim, Abijah stood on Mount Zemaraim and shouted to Jeroboam and all Israel, "Listen to me. Don't you realize that the Lord, or Yahweh, the God of Israel, made a lasting covenant with David, giving him and his descendants the throne of Israel forever? Yet Jeroboam, son of Nebat, a mere servant of David's son Solomon, rebelled against his master. Then a whole gang of scoundrels joined him, defying Solomon's son Rehoboam when he was young and inexperienced and could not stand up to them. So Abijah is trying to make a case that the northern tribe should return. Do you really think you can stand against the kingdom of Yahweh that is led by the descendants of David? Now, mind you, he's got an army half the size of the army he's trying to defeat, but he's going to talk. He's going to talk like he's got something here. You may have a vast army, and you have those gold calves that Jeroboam made as your gods, but you have chased away the priests of the Lord, the descendants of Aaron, and the Levites, and you have appointed your own priests, just like the pagan nations. You let anyone become a priest these days. Whoever comes to be dedicated with a young bull and 7 rams can become a priest of these so-called gods of yours. But as for us, Yahweh is our God, and we have not abandoned him. Well, if you are that arrogant, you probably have, but that's what he's saying anyway. Only the descendants of Aaron serve Yahweh as priests, and the Levites alone may help them in their work. They present burnt offerings and fragrant incense to Yahweh every morning and evening. They place the bread of the presence on the holy table, and they light the gold lampstand every evening. We are following the instructions of the Lord our God, but you have abandoned him. So you see, God is with us. He is our leader. His priests blow their trumpets and lead us into battle against you. O people of Israel, do not fight against Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, for you will not succeed. Meanwhile, Jeroboam had secretly sent part of his army around behind the men of Judah to ambush them. When Judah realized that they were being attacked from the front and the rear, they cried out to the Lord for help. Then the priests blew their trumpets, and the men of Judah began to shout. At the sound of their battle cry, God defeated Jeroboam and all Israel and routed them before Abijah and the army of Judah. Notice we didn't read this story in the book of Kings. This is something we only find here. The Israelite army fled from Judah, and God handed them over to Judah in defeat. Abijah and his army inflicted heavy losses on them. 500,000 of Israel's select troops were killed that day. So Judah defeated Israel on that occasion because they trusted in the Lord, the God of their ancestors. Well, that's the take that the authors here want us to believe coming out of this. Abijah and his army pursued Jeroboam's troops and captured some of his towns, including Bethel, Jeshanah, and Ephraim, along with their surrounding villages. So Jeroboam of Israel never regained his power during Abijah's lifetime, and finally the Lord struck him down and he died. Meanwhile, Abijah of Judah grew more and more powerful. He married 14 wives and had 22 sons and 16 daughters. The rest of the events of Abijah's reign, including his words and deeds, are recorded in the commentary of Iddo the prophet. Now, we don't have the commentary of Iddo the prophet, and these references to his works are about all we know about him. In fact, just for the fun of it, there's my Bible dictionary. Let me look up Iddo here just to see what it says about him. Okay, IDO. So IDD will come before that. IDDO, Iddo. And there are several entries here. The rendering of several Hebrew words with different meanings, not all of which are definitely agreed on by commentators. Number 1, the father of Abinadab, 1 Kings 4:14. Number 2, a descendant of Gershon, son of Levi, 1 Chronicles 6:21. 3, son of Zechariah, ruler of the tribe of Manasseh, east of Jordan, in the time of David, 1 Chronicles 27:21. Number 4, a seer whose visions against Jeroboam incidentally contain some of the acts of Solomon, 2 Chronicles 9:29. He appears to have written a chronicle or story relating to the life and reign of Abijah, 2 Chronicles 13:22, which is what we just read. And then he's also the grandfather of the prophet Zechariah, Zechariah 1:1 and 7. And number 6, the chief of those who assembled at Casiphia at the time of the second caravan from Babylon. He was one of the Nethinim, Ezra 8:17, and compare verse 20. So those were the various Iddos. And so there isn't a whole lot known about this prophet or seer known as Iddo, or what level of authorization he had to speak for God. We don't really know what he had to say about God. We just know that he issued these historical accounts. Yeah. I'm looking at the time here, and I'm thinking I got so carried away with everything. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we have a little less than a half hour here, so we can probably go through at least this chapter, maybe another chapter. When Abijah died, he was buried in the city of David. Then his son Asa became the next king. There was peace in the land for 10 years. Asa did what was pleasing and good in the sight of the Lord his God. He removed the foreign altars and the pagan shrines. He smashed the sacred pillars and cut down the Asherah poles. He commanded the people of Judah to seek Yahweh, the God of their ancestors, and to obey his law and his commands. Asa also removed the pagan shrines, as well as the incense altars from every one of Judah's towns. So Asa's kingdom enjoyed a period of peace. During those peaceful years, he was able to build up the fortified towns throughout Judah, just like his grandfather Rehoboam had done, no? No one tried to make war against him at this time, for the Lord was giving him rest from his enemies. Well, if it happened, God did it, right? Asa told the people of Judah, let us build towns and fortify them with walls, towers, gates, and bars. The land is still ours because we sought Yahweh our God, and he has given us peace on every side. So they went ahead with these projects and brought them to completion. King Asa had an army of 300,000 warriors from the tribe of Judah, armed with large shields and spears. He also had an army of 280,000 warriors from the tribe of Benjamin, armed with small shields and bows. Both armies were composed of well-trained fighting men. Once an Ethiopian named Zerah attacked Judah with an army of 1,000,000 men and 300 chariots. They advanced to the town of Mareshah, so Asa deployed his armies for battle in the valley north of Mareshah. Then Asa cried out to the Lord his God, O Lord, no one but you can help the powerless against the mighty. Help us, O Lord our God, for we trust in you alone. It is in your name that we have come against this vast horde. O Lord, you are our God. Do not let mere men prevail against you. Now, we have just passed over a whole string of footnotes there. We've gotten through E already, so let's go down and look at those. Yeah, the first one was kind of what I thought. It has to do with numbering in the Hebrew text versus numbering in the English text, which I don't think matters not one bit, because the numbering is all done after the fact. You know, we're not trying to make the English numbering match the numbering that the Hebrew authors put in place when they first wrote it down, because that's not how it was done. It's done later. Hebrew reads a Cushite, okay, they say Ethiopian for Cushite. A lot of modern translations do that. Or an army of thousands and thousands. The Hebrew reads an army of 1,000 thousands, which is why they would then say 1,000,000. And then E says, as in the Greek version, the Hebrew reads valley of Zaphatha near Mareshah. And then the last footnote, which we haven't quite gotten to, is Cushites again, although I'm sure it'll say Ethiopians, yes. So the Lord defeated the Ethiopians in the presence of Asa and the army of Judah, and the enemy fled. Asa and his army pursued them as far as Gerar, and so many Ethiopians fell that they were unable to rally. They were destroyed by the Lord and his army, and the army of Judah carried off a vast amount of plunder. Now, if you read that last sentence explicitly, that it says that the Lord, the Creator, destroyed. And now you have the Creator destroying. But what we've learned from Revelation is that there is a Creator and there is a destroyer. So if destruction is taking place, it is not the Creator doing it, it is the destroyer doing it. These people aren't prepared to understand it, so they write it the way they can understand it. God did it. We asked God for help, he helped us. Well, he may have let you prevail because of his promises to you, but that doesn't mean he did it. While they were at Gerar, they attacked all the towns in that area, and terror from the Lord came upon the people there. As a result, a vast amount of plunder was taken from these towns too. They also attacked the camps of herdsmen and captured many sheep, goats, and camels before finally returning to Jerusalem. And that was the way of the times. Property rights were negotiable through force, essentially. If you had the force, you could take the property. If you didn't have the force, you went without. I didn't think it was going to take that long. I didn't think it was going to take a half hour to get through that chapter, and it didn't. Now we get to read about Asa's religious reforms. Then the Spirit of God came upon Azariah, son of Oded, and he went out to meet King Asa as he was returning from the battle. "Listen to me, Asa," he shouted. "Listen, all you people of Judah and Benjamin. The Lord will stay with you as long as you stay with him. Whenever you seek him, you will find him. But if you abandon him, he will abandon you. For a long time Israel was without the true God, without a priest to teach them, and without the law to instruct them. But whenever they were in trouble and turned to the Lord, the God of Israel, and sought him out, they found him. During those dark times, it was not safe to travel. Remember the story we read in the book of Judges about the guy who was traveling from Bethlehem back to the hill country of Ephraim and who stayed in one of the towns of Benjamin. It was not safe to travel. Problems troubled the people of every land. Nation fought against nation and city against city, for God was troubling them with every kind of problem. If you've got humans involved, you don't need an outside source for strife and contention. Humans can come up with that all by themselves. They don't need any help. But as for you, be strong and courageous, for your work will be rewarded." When Asa heard this message from Azariah the prophet, footnote A, come on, let's scroll through the right screen here. As in the Syriac version of the Latin Vulgate, see also 15:1, the Hebrew reads from Oded the prophet. Well, Azariah says you're son of Oded, so. When Asa heard this message from the prophet, he took courage and removed all the detestable idols from the land of Judah and Benjamin and in the towns he had captured in the hill country of Ephraim. And he repaired the altar of the Lord, which stood in front of the entry room of the Lord's temple. Then Asa called together all the people of Judah and Benjamin, along with all the people of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon, who had settled among them. For many from Israel had moved to Judah during Asa's reign, when they saw that the Lord his God was with him. The people gathered at Jerusalem in late spring during the 15th year of Asa's reign. Late spring, footnote B, it probably names, in the third month. This month of the ancient Hebrew lunar calendar usually occurs within the months of May and June. On that day they sacrificed to the Lord 700 cattle and 7,000 sheep and goats from the plunder they had taken in the battle. Then they entered into a covenant to seek the Lord, the God of their ancestors, with all their heart and soul. They agreed that anyone who refused to seek the Lord, the God of Israel, would be put to death, whether young or old, man or woman. Well, that's not religious liberty, is it? And some people read this and think, well, see there, the Bible approves not having religious liberty. The Bible is an enemy of religious liberty. Well, if you take what they did as what we should do, I guess it does, but what broken humans do should never be our example. We read verse 13, reading on 14. They shouted out their oath of loyalty to the Lord with trumpets blaring and ram's horns sounding. All in Judah were happy about this covenant, for they had entered into it with all their heart. They earnestly sought after God, and they found him. And the Lord gave them rest from their enemies on every side. King Asa even deposed his grandmother, Maacah, remember she was a granddaughter of Absalom, from her position as queen mother because she had made an obscene Asherah pole. Now, obscene is probably a relatively accurate description of an Asherah pole because generally we believe that these poles were phallic symbols. So it was essentially a great big male organ standing out there for people to worship at. That's obscene. And so they identified it here as obscene. He cut down her obscene pole, broke it up, and burned it in the Kidron Valley. All of the pagan shrines were not removed from Israel. I thought they just said it had, but now they're saying it didn't. Asa's heart remained completely faithful throughout his life. He brought into the temple of God the silver and gold and the various items that he and his father had dedicated. So there was no more war until the 35th year of Asa's reign. Oh, Hebrew says his mother, but we know it was his grandmother because Maacah was Ahijah's mother. Abijah. I think it's Abijah, isn't it? Things don't stick in my head like they used to. Okay, move on to the next chapter. And looking at the time here. Come on, get down there where I can see the time. Yeah. In the 36th year of Asa's reign, King Baasha of Israel invaded Judah and fortified Ramah in order to prevent anyone from entering or leaving King Asa's territory in Judah. Well, you can understand why a king might want to do that if his people are defecting southward. Put something up to stop them. Build walls. Controlling and autocratic regimes in the last century built walls. And now our own country is building walls. We say it's to keep people out, but a wall that keeps people out can also be used to keep people in. Asa responded by removing the silver and gold from the treasuries of the temple of the Lord and the royal palace. He sent it to King Ben-Hadad of Aram, who was ruling in Damascus, along with this message. Let there be a treaty between you and me, like the one between your father and my father. See, I am sending you silver and gold. Break your treaty with King Baasha of Israel, so that he will leave me alone. Ben-Hadad agreed to King Asa's request and sent the commanders, can't find where my cursor is so I can scroll the right screen here, sent the commanders of his army to attack the towns of Israel. They conquered the towns of Ijon, Dan, Abel-Beth-Maacah, and all the store cities in Naphtali. As soon as Baasha of Israel heard what was happening, he abandoned his project of fortifying Ramah and stopped all work on it. Then King Asa called out all the men of Judah to carry away the building stones and timbers that Baasha had been using to fortify Ramah. Asa used these materials to fortify the towns of Geba and Mizpah. At that time, Hananiah the seer came to King Asa and told him, "Because you have put your trust in the king of Aram instead of in the Lord your God, you missed your chance to destroy the army of the king of Aram. Don't you remember what happened to the Cushites and Libyans and their vast army with all of their chariots and charioteers? That happened earlier in his reign, as you may recall. At that time, you relied on the Lord, and he handed them over to you. The eyes of the Lord search the whole earth in order to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. What a fool you have been. From now on you will be at war. Asa became so angry with Hanani for saying this that he threw him into prison and put him in stocks. At that time, Asa also began to oppress some of his people. The rest of the events of Asa's reign from beginning to end are recorded in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. In the 39th year of his reign, Asa developed a serious foot disease. Yet even with the severity of his disease, he did not seek the Lord's help, but turned only to his physicians. So he died in the 41st year of his reign. He was buried in a tomb that he had carved out for himself in the city of David. He was laid on a bed perfumed with sweet spices and fragrant ointments, and the people built a huge funeral fire in his honor. Well, I mean, this is just history. It goes by pretty quickly. So we've got about 10 more minutes. Let's go ahead and get in at least one more chapter. Then Jehoshaphat, Asa's son, became the next king. He strengthened Judah to stand against any attack from Israel. He stationed troops in all the fortified towns of Judah, and he assigned additional garrisons to the land of Judah and to the towns of Ephraim that his father Asa had captured. The Lord was with Jehoshaphat because he followed the example of his father's early years and did not worship the images of Baal. He sought his father's God and obeyed his commands instead of following the evil practices of the kingdom of Israel. So the Lord established Jehoshaphat's control over the kingdom of Judah. All the people of Judah brought gifts to Jehoshaphat, so he became very wealthy and highly esteemed. He was deeply committed to the ways of the Lord. He removed the pagan shrines and the Asherah poles from Judah. Now, here's another case where I think we're seeing a little bit of whitewashing going on by the authors of these accounts. Jehoshaphat generally was considered to be a good king. Even in the books of Kings, he was not considered terribly evil. But we know that he brought about a lot of evil because of his alliance with Ahab. We'll see what this says about that. He removed the pagan shrines and Asherah poles from Judah. In the 3rd year of his reign, Jehoshaphat sent his officials to teach in all the towns of Judah. These officials included Ben-Hail, Obadiah, Zechariah, Nethanel, and Micaiah. He sent Levites along with him, including Shemaiah, Nethaniah, Zebediah, Asahel, Shemiramoth, Jehonathan, Adonijah, Tobijah, and Tobadonijah. He also sent out the priests Elishama and Jehoram. They took copies of the book of the law of the Lord and traveled around through all the towns of Judah, teaching the people. Then the fear of the Lord fell over all the surrounding kingdom, so that none of them wanted to declare war on Jehoshaphat. Some of the Philistines brought him gifts and silver as tribute, and the Arabs brought 7,700 rams and 7,700 male goats. So Jehoshaphat became more and more powerful and built fortresses and storage cities throughout Judah. He stored numerous supplies in Judah's towns and stationed an army of seasoned troops at Jerusalem. His army was enrolled according to ancestral clans. From Judah, there were 300,000 troops organized in units of 1,000 under the command of Adnah. Next in command was Jehohanan, who commanded 280,000 troops. Next was Amasiah, son of Zichri, who volunteered for the Lord's service with 200,000 troops under his command. From Benjamin there were 200,000 troops equipped with bows and shields. They were under the command of Eliada, a veteran soldier. Next in command was Jehoshaphat, who commanded 180,000 armed men. These were the troops stationed in Jerusalem to serve the king, besides those Jehoshaphat stationed in the fortified towns throughout Judah. Now there is more, because I know that chapter 20 mentions Jehoshaphat, so we're going to run into quite a bit of it. But this talks about Jehoshaphat and Ahab, so this will get mentioned here in Chronicles, so now we can put that to rest. Yes, they do mention it. Jehoshaphat enjoyed great riches and high esteem, and he made an alliance with Ahab of Israel by having his son marry Ahab's daughter. That was a disaster, although it happened after Jehoshaphat's death. A few years later, he went to Samaria to visit Ahab, who prepared a great banquet for him and his officials. They butchered great numbers of sheep, goats, and cattle for the feast. Then Ahab enticed Jehoshaphat to join forces with him to recover Ramoth Gilead. Now, we read this account in the books of the Kings. It's near the end of 1 Kings, as I recall. Will you go with me to Ramoth Gilead, King Ahab of Israel? Asked King Jehoshaphat of Judah. Jehoshaphat replied, Why, of course. You and I are as one, and my troops are your troops. We will certainly join you in battle. Then Jehoshaphat added, But first, let's find out what the Lord says. So the king of Israel summoned the prophets, 400 of them, and asked them, Should we go to war against Ramoth Gilead, or should I hold back? They all replied, Yes, go right ahead. God will give the king victory. But Jehoshaphat asked, Is there not also a prophet of Yahweh here? We should ask him the same question. The king of Israel replied to Jehoshaphat, There is one more man who could consult Yahweh for us, but I hate him. He never prophesies anything but trouble for me. His name is Micaiah, son of Imlah. Jehoshaphat replied, That's not the way a king should talk. Let's hear what he has to say. So the king of Israel called one of his officials and said, Quick, bring Micaiah, son of Imlah. King Ahab of Israel and King Jehoshaphat of Judah, dressed in their royal robes, were sitting on thrones at the threshing floor near the gate of Samaria. All of Ahab's prophets were prophesying there in front of them. One of them, Zedekiah, son of Kenaanah, made some iron horns and proclaimed, This is what the Lord says. With these horns were a symbol of strength, you will gore the Arameans to death. All the other prophets agreed. Yes, they said, Go up to Ramoth Gilead and be victorious, for Yahweh will give the king victory. Meanwhile, the messenger who went to get Micaiah said to him, Look, all the prophets are promising victory for the king. Be sure that you agree with them and promise success. But Micaiah replied, As surely as Yahweh lives, I will say only what my God says. When Micaiah arrived before the king, Ahab asked him, Micaiah, should we go to war against Ramoth Gilead, or should I hold back? Micaiah replied sarcastically, and I'm sure that's an interpretation that these translators have added, given what they know about the story. Yes, go up and be victorious, for you will have victory over them. But the king replied sharply, How many times must I demand that you speak only the truth to me when you speak for Yahweh? Then Micaiah told him, In a vision I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains, like sheep without a shepherd. And the Lord said, Their master has been killed. Send them home in peace. Footnote A, these people have no master. All right, I think that was a similar rendition back there in Kings when we read this story there. Their master has been killed. Send them home in peace. Didn't I tell you, the king of Israel exclaimed to Jehoshaphat, He never prophesies anything but trouble for me. I don't suppose there was a reason for that. You know, if you're going to have insight and know what could happen, and you're saying that bad things are going to happen, could it be that you're saying that not because of any bias on your part, but because of the problems your target is creating for themselves? Ahab's arrogance, his unwillingness to stand up to his wife, etc., etc. These things were going to bring trouble on Ahab, and anybody who could see what was going on could foretell that. They might keep their mouths shut in order to keep their heads. But now Micaiah, he got told to tell the truth, so he's telling the truth, even to power. Then Micaiah continued. We've talked about this story as well. Listen to what Yahweh says. I saw Yahweh sitting on his throne with all the armies of heaven around him on his right and on his left. And the Lord said, who can entice King Ahab of Israel to go into battle against Ramoth-Gilead so he can be killed? There were many suggestions. And finally his spirit approached the Lord and said, I can do it. How will you do this? The Lord asked. And the Spirit replied, I will go out and inspire all of Ahab's prophets to speak lies. You will succeed, said the Lord. Go ahead and do it. So you see, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouths of your prophets, for the Lord has pronounced your doom. Now, in the book of Kings, we can understand that they didn't understand about a destroyer, an enemy of God. So they would say this. But we have seen in previous accounts where these authors were willing to attribute at least some of the destruction to somebody other than Yahweh, but they didn't get around to it here. And it may be that they're just kind of rewriting what they are reading from the books of the prophets pre-captivity. And this is what they wrote. And since they didn't have a concept of a power who might have a council and decide how to handle things other than the Creator, they laid all this at the feet of the Creator. Was there someone who wanted Ahab's doom? Well, yeah. He would like to see the entire human race destroyed. He would bring that about if he was allowed to. He hasn't been allowed to. Now, would that individual countenance the idea of one of his agents serving as a lying spirit in the mouths of Ahab's prophets? Yeah. As Jesus said about him, he was a liar from the beginning. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding from the truth, for there's no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language. Yeah, he would lie. Then Zedekiah, son of Kenana, walked up to Micaiah and slapped him across the face. Since when did the Spirit of the Lord lead me to speak to you? He demanded. Typical narcissistic approach. If you don't like what you hear, go slap a person and make sarcastic, nasty comments about it. Suggest that, hey, I'm right, you're wrong. And Micaiah replied, you'll find out soon enough when you're trying to hide in some secret room. Arrest him, the king of Israel ordered. Take him back to Ammon, the governor of the city, and to my son Joash. Give them this order from the king. Put this man in prison and feed him nothing but bread and water until I return safely from the battle. But Micaiah replied, if you return safely, it will mean that the Lord has not spoken through me. Then he added to those standing around, everyone mark my words. So King Ahab of Israel and King Jehoshaphat of Judah led their armies against Ramoth-Gilead. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, as we go into battle, I will disguise myself so no one will recognize me, but you wear your royal robes. So the king of Israel disguised himself, and they went into battle. Meanwhile, the king of Aram had issued these orders to his chariot commanders. Attack only the king of Israel. Don't bother with anyone else. So when the Aramean chariot commanders saw Jehoshaphat in his royal robes, they went after him. There's the king of Israel, they shouted. But Jehoshaphat called out, and the Lord saved him. God helped him by turning the attackers away from him. As soon as the chariot commanders realized he was not the king of Israel, they stopped chasing him. An Aramean soldier, however, randomly shot an arrow at the Israelite troops, and he hit the king of Israel between the joints of his armor. "Turn the horses and get me out of here," Ahab groaned at the driver of his chariot. "I'm badly wounded." The battle raged all that day, and the king of Israel propped himself up in his chariot, facing the Arameans. In the evening, just as the sun was setting, he died. And that's essentially the story as we read it in the book of Kings. So this does not really vary from that account much at all, except you may notice here, and the book of Kings just said Jehoshaphat called out. The Arameans realized he wasn't the king of Israel, and they quit chasing him. These writers had to put in that the Lord saved him. And maybe he did. I mean, God is with those who are with him. We discussed that. So God may have stepped in to protect him. And so I won't say this is wrong. I just find it interesting that they put it here when the prophets who wrote the other accounts didn't. And looking at the clock here, I think it's it's past time actually for us to wrap this up. I see that I forgot to start recording. I have a note here to tell me to do that, and it's right there. You can hear me flicking the paper, and I didn't read it. I didn't do it. So now I have to download it from Facebook to get it onto YouTube. Aggravation, but that's the way life is. And we will continue next week. And next week will be the 15th. And then the following day, Saturday, will be the 16th. And according to our schedule, we're to do a sermon presentation then. So I'll have to look and see what kind of topic I'm supposed to be working on and come up with something between now and then. But we will continue here from, let's see, we're in Jehoshaphat 18, in 2 Chronicles 18, in the story of Jehoshaphat. So we will continue and do chapters 19, 20, and on next week as we continue this. So we invite you to join us next week, and until next week, we say goodbye and God bless.